Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a live edition of Ghost Chronicles-Next Generation. I am Ron Kolek, your host, the gatekeeper to the realm of the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable New England's own Van Helsing. It seems so weird saying it in front of a TV camera because it's so long. With me, my co-host, all the way from the chair next to me, is the blonde bombshell herself, Anne Kerrigan.
Well, hello.
So
this is odd.
You know, we're not really used to being next to each other.
No.
So I guess I'll have to behave myself.
I don't think you can.
No, I can't anyways.
How did you get to be the gatekeeper of the unknown and all that stuff anyways?
That came out like 15 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah. When the first show came out, I wanted to do this really interesting opening, and that's the crap I came up with.
Okay.
So there you go.
Works for me.
And 15 years later, it's still here. So, no, the gatekeeper, because the show has always been meant to take you on a journey, and that's just what it says, and everything what it that really says in the opening, it's what it's about.
Okay.
You know, you will not believe, some won't. But, you know, is there, you know, science, religion clash? You know, does it?
Okay.
So that's the answers that we're looking for, the
Here we are.
unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. So you're feeling a little odd, right? Because this is our
Yes.
first show. Yeah,
Yes.
but that's all right.
Yes.
But we do have a good show because we share no expense in this.
That's right.
Because we
pulled out all the stops.
Right. We flew in a couple of real celebs, para-celebs, right? At least in the UK. And so I'll introduce them anyways. The first one we have is a funny-looking gentleman from the UK, from Wales, actually, excuse me. And he is the founder of Parascience. He has also been on that TV show over there, Most Haunted, which was on for 10 years or so.
That was one of my favorite shows.
I liked it too. I really did. I know you stole the name
I'd
from
love to
East
see that
Bridgewater's
woman.
Most Haunted.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love to see that woman go screaming out of the room.
I do too. You know what? In all fairness, I mean, I've investigated with Ann for quite a bit, and I've tried like hell to get her to go screaming out of the room, and I haven't been able to do it yet, but I'm working on it. So, anyways, he is the founder of Parascience, been on Most Haunted. He is the Wall Street Journal columnist. Get this out, okay? Figure this.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal, which is a pretty mainstream newspaper.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. They sent the reporter over to the UK to actually talk to this guy for 3 days or something. And anyways, they dubbed him the Wall Street Journal, not me.
Okay.
The gold standard in ghost hunting. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our first guest, one of our guests, Mr. Steve Parsons.
Steve?
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, you wish.
Okay.
Okay.
Nice try.
And that one that was just talking, the clone of Steve, is a parapsychologist from the UK. He has written the book Phone Calls from the Dead, and also has a new one coming out called Conversations with Ghosts. And you know, I can't believe that I've actually remembered both those titles.
I'm extremely impressed.
And he is
That's pretty amazing.
Callum Cooper. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Steve's supposed to say welcome. So
Welcome.
Welcome. Pleasure to have
Thank
me
you for coming.
me here.
Absolute delight.
Oh, thank you.
all right. So you guys have you're a parapsychologist. You're something.
Ghostbuster.
There you go.
Ghostbuster, apparently.
You're a Ghostbuster.
All right.
You've been in the UK. You've done television for both of you did. In fact, you both completed a Japanese special just a little while ago. I mean, what's the difference between working in television and just, you know, working?
There isn't a lot. The lights are brighter in television, but It's horses for courses. It depends exactly what you're doing. I mean, we're in a studio today, and we're talking. That wouldn't be very different from, say, the radio show or an education type event. But what we've recently completed is a documentary, and in the case of that, we just went about a normal investigation process, and we had a film crew following us for the 3 days. There were cutaway interviews amongst that, while we had to explain some of the concepts that we were working with. There are also, of course, you've mentioned Most Haunted, and I apologise for that. On behalf of the British people.
No, we actually love it. We love Most Haunted. Anne does, I do.
I thought it was a lot of fun.
I do
Yes.
feel obliged for that landmark in paranormal television. And of course, you retaliated with Super Mario Brothers,
Okay.
which I think is.
I believe he's referring to the Ghost Hunters. I could be wrong, but I'm getting that Super Mario Brothers. Yeah.
You got two plumbers chasing ghosts.
Okay.
It was Super Mario
It
Brothers.
works. Yeah.
So.
Apparently.
Yeah, so I apologise, but Most Haunted was most people consider, and it's a kind of. I don't think it's like soap operas. I think people didn't quite get Most Haunted. Most Haunted, and to an extent, Ghost Hunters and others, they're not ghost investigation programs. That's the theme, but they're an entertainment program based on that theme.
Oh.
And it's really about marketing. It's about selling selling the ad breaks and hooking people back for the next show. So it's around a ghost theme.
Okay.
It could be around an Alaskan crab fishery theme. It could be around a towing company in the Carolinas, or.
You watch way too much American TV.
Yeah.
I know. So it's an entertainment television program first and foremost. It's not really investigative, and one of the problems, of course, is a lot of people assume that the investigation methods used on the program are good investigation methods for them going out and investigating the paranormal.
Okay.
The TV can display whatever it wants to, so long as it's sending out the right message that they want to the audience. Some of the stuff that I've done before, when it's just a clear debate between a paranormal believer and then they want the resident skeptic and the scientist, and they try and, at least they want a clear black and white argument for the audience, so the scientist tends to have to play more of the cynic role than the skeptic. So they're coming up with all these rational explanations to possibly explain away the paranormal, so there isn't any chance that it could kind of leak through. And that's probably the difference between TV and the real world. In the real world, the scientist, they're in it for a reason. I think they're just looking for truth. They're not going to still push away the evidence, hopefully, even if it's right in front of them. So sometimes you might not get always a clear or honest view when it comes to the TV and the paranormal compared to the real world.
So, I mean, Cal, you're a parapsychologist, and most people think parapsychologist is a ghost hunter, but that's kind of not true at all, right?
Oh, that's right. Parapsychology, as an actual science, kicked off after psychical research in the 1930s in the university-based setting, where people, it did.
They were kicked off.
It kicked off. It really got in there, got its foot in the door. In the 1930s,
Legitimate love child.
with a
Ghost
bang,
hunting.
there was a big party and everything. They said parapsychology starts right here.
All right.
So that was all lab-based testing of psychic phenomena. There was still investigations, field investigations of seances and some hauntings, but it really started there in the academic curriculum and just progressed from there. It moved away from investigations of hauntings, ghosts and poltergeists. So there's only very few, just a select few, you could probably count them on one hand, how many parapsychologists actively go out and investigate hauntings and ghosts.
Right. I mean, we know of Dr. Karen O'Keefe from.
Right. Most Haunted.
Thank you.
I
And-
apologise once again.
And of course, we know Lloyd Arbrecht, who is probably our most famous parapsychologist that deals with ghosts. Who else does that in parapsychology?
Dr. Calcutta.
Well, I mean, besides you, Cal, I apologize.
Dr. Simon Sherwood as well. Dr. Anne Winsper.
There are within the UK. There are probably 3 or 4. There are 3 or 4 in America as well. James Horan has investigated haunting.
James Randi?
James Horan.
Oh, they said Randy. That's a whole new,
William
different
Moore,
horse.
Yeah, that's right.
is another one who is specialising mainly in poltergeist phenomena.
So, I mean, is parapsychologists who study ghosts the black sheep of the parapsychology family?
They do tend to be.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it's very rare when you get like a main conference or presentation of the latest research going on. You might get the odd one paper that looks at ghosts, poltergeists or hauntings. And personally, I don't think a great deal of attention is actually paid to it, when really it should. You know, usually that's the one I'm looking out for when it comes to the latest conference. That's
Actually,
the one.
they're all secret ghost hunters, because when we go to the conference with the Society for Psychical Research, it's absolutely chock full of psychologists, and we have to sit through endless days of interminable psychobabble about transpersonal psychology and the Gansfeld and all this other stuff. And then
Healing.
it comes to the ghost hunting day, and we present the results of an investigation or something related, chock block. And they all come up, "Oh, that was really interesting." They're all secret ghost hunters. Every one of them. The trouble is, they're probably afraid of the dark. Or afraid of losing their funding.
Oh.
Because playing safe, you remember the line in Ghostbusters, "I like universities, they give you money, you don't have to produce anything." I think is applicable.
The private sector expects results.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Doctor.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
Dr. Venkman.
So, I mean, Steve, you're a ghost hunter, but I mean, today, I don't know, it's a strange world we live in, when I think about, because there's so many people out there who have created groups, and there are so many groups. Like I said, I've said it 100 times, that, you know, when I started, there was like 24 in the country. Now there's like 24 in Trailer Park. And it's really amazing, and a lot of them will...
Sock sisters.
Yeah. And anyways, it's amazing because they use instruments, and we discuss some of these instruments that they use, like the K2 meter, and they call themselves scientific. Are they being scientific, and how is that defined for ghost hunting?
Well, as it's a one-off show and I'm going 3,500 miles away after it, they are absolutely not being scientific. The K2 meter is, well, it's a toy. Science is not about the equipment. Science is a methodology. It is a series of processes that starts with an idea or a discovery, and then you test the idea, and then you evaluate the results, and then you look at retesting, and then you put it to peer review and publishing. I mean, a monkey can do science. You don't need to have a K2 meter. In fact, you're not doing science with a K2 meter, because a K2 meter was built by the manufacturer to do a very
You do it if you use it for a specific job.
it was built to do a very specific job. It says so on the instruction sheet. It's designed to look for electromagnetic radiation from man-made sources, your cell phone, your microwave oven. The idea that you can then, with no rationale or logic at all, apart from some guy on a television program or some company in Florida saying, "Hey, we can knock these out at $79.99, and talk to dead people by looking at the flashy lights." There is no science. I mean, I've seen groups' websites where they say they list their equipment, and they have their psychic equipment and they have the science equipment. And I'll just give you a quick quote. You obviously have the Ouija board and the medium listed on the psychic side, but they include the dowsing rods on the science side.
Do you do? I never knew that.
With a camera. Just because it's got a battery in it doesn't mean it does science.
Right. Well, I think a lot of our listeners will be disappointed to hear that.
They shouldn't really be disappointed, because they should do what they want to do. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. But you shouldn't really.
There's nothing wrong with amateur investigators.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well,
but
if you look in terms of, for example, archaeology or astronomy, the Biedermann comet, these great discoveries were made by amateurs, and science comes along, or men of science come along later, and they take the glory. The problem with amateur investigators is that they need to up their game, and they just need to work to a good standard. The best evidence that we're exploring the human experience, and so what we need is people and more accounts of their experiences. And let's look at, for a quick take at full spectrum photography, which is huge at the moment. They're using it to look for apparitions, they're using it to look for ghosts in the infrared and the ultraviolet range, which seems logical except the original witness saw the apparition in the visible range.
That's right.
Right.
So what we need to do is, first of all, study the witness experience. The witness saw the apparition, so anything else is superfluous. Start with the known and work out to the unknown. Until we understand what the witness saw, there's no point in looking anywhere else, because anything you find is likely to mislead you.
And the criticism, of course, of many things, I mean, is I know when my book came out, Ghost Chronicles, and I don't know if you ever, oh no, you haven't published a book, I'm sorry about that.
No, I don't have a single book. I've never written a book.
Unlike Cal.
Nothing to say.
But the titles, that's a private joke.
All week, it's been like that. All week.
Nice.
The title of it is actually selected by the publisher. So in ours is a medium and a scientist. Okay. So one of the big criticisms I received that there is no such thing as a paranormal scientist. So it's kind of like there's no such thing as a paranormal expert. And what is your response to that? And, well, actually, let's start with Callum there. What's his name? Cal.
Yeah, I always stick with that.
Calvin.
I believe you can be an expert of your own field of study. I mean, I'm not specifically trained as just a parapsychologist. I'm trained as a psychologist. That's how I started out. So I branched out into loads of different areas of psychology to gain a general understanding of psychology itself. So that's, educational psychology, child psychology, forensic psychology, and many different things before I got the degree. And then after that, I homed in on specific things that I wanted to specialise in. So research methods, death, dying and bereavement, but more so parapsychology. So looking at what everyone has gathered from this topic that we don't really understand, these paranormal events, what are the kind of common experiences going on, what lab research has actually been done to kind of test people for these psychic abilities, is there any evidence for survival of death? So from the existing data that we have, I have fairly good knowledge of that. I'm happy to say that I do. But do I know what the paranormal is itself, how it works, how it operates? No, I don't. I'm not an expert in that, but I'm an expert in the field of the study of that. That's as far as I go to say that there's such thing as an expert. How would you put it, sir?
How would you put it, Steve? Good
What
point.
is it that ghost hunters are measuring? They're measuring temperature, humidity, electromagnetic radiation, and
Lux.
the physical environment. And I have degree qualifications in exactly that subject. But I also have a nursing degree as well. So that allows me to understand the measurements of anatomy and physiology. But both together, I'm used to working with a high degree of precision because it's important in both fields, engineering and in medicine, that you work to a high degree of precision. And they are the perfect tools for ghost hunting. And I'm qualified, and I'm still currently qualified in those branches, so that makes me an expert ghost hunter, because that's what ghost hunters measure. Moreover, if we look at modern equipment that's coming out, like thermal imaging, I know Ron's just bought a thermal imaging camera.
Yeah, I got a flare now.
When we got our camera, I knew it was important to spend £700, so that's around about $1,000, to do the training course to get the qualifications in order to be able to operate the equipment properly.
Okay. I think we have a question.
Right, and this is actually what we're going to mention, is you're listening to Ghost Chronicles right here on East Bridgewater's...
East Bridgewater Community Television.
Yeah, that too. And it's also being shown on TogiNet. And you can join the TogiNet chat room and ask your questions for any of us up here. So we do have a question. We're going to ask you to come in a little closer because I can't read it.
Come closer, Emily. I can't see.
Come a little closer. That's all right. You're going on camera. It's our
That's
first
all
show.
right.
That's fine,
Come
Emily.
on. It's okay. Oh, I think I can read it.
There you go.
Okay. Question from Steve. Do Cal and Steve feel that televised ghost hunting has improved or damaged the field of ghost hunting or parapsychology?
In terms of popularity and scientific application.
Thank you for finishing.
Thank you.
because I was having trouble.
I mean, this is our first show, so I mean, we're going to work out the kinks on some of this. Thank you, Emily. Thank you very
Emily.
much. Yep. So there you go. The question is to you.
it's a double-edged sword, because there are a lot of people who have got into ghost hunting through the media. I mean, Kieran O'Keefe, his interest was sparked by the Ghostbusters movie. Lots of people realised for the first time that ghost hunting who may have had an interest, but realised for the first time that it wasn't an exclusive pursuit, that they too, be they plumber or makeup lady, they too could go out ghost hunting. And a lot of people have pursued that interest to, as I said before, they've raised their game, and we do have lots of good investigators here in America and over in the UK who started by watching TV ghost hunting programs. Even before Most Haunted, we had Arthur C. Clarke's series and others in the UK, and possibly over here too. But it is a double-edged sword, because, as I said earlier, a lot of people don't go beyond that realisation that they can do it too, and you end up in a situation where instead of going to the movies on a Saturday night with a bag of popcorn and watching The Exorcist for a scary night out, they go with their friends and their K2 meters for an interactive scary night out, but they which is great, but they mix it up and think that that's real investigation, and instead of producing results and submitting it for peer review and analysis and contributing.
Oh, wait a minute, I disagree. They put it on Facebook.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, that's...
Finish my lines for me.
Well, that's...
Why ask the question?
Whatever.
Now
they do post it on Facebook. That's their peer review.
And that's not peer review, because if you argue with them, you get blocked.
Right.
Yeah, well, they were their peers, but They
are only your peers until you dare question them. But it is a double-edged sword. I mean, now in the UK we have people doing live tweets from ghost investigations.
I've done that before.
Stay tuned for our live tweet. Now, like nothing heard in session 3. Footsteps reported in there. I'm losing the will to live.
Steve's mentioned the bad aspects that have come from it, but certainly the good ones is it's brought an awareness for parapsychology and the genuine research that's going on. We've had quite a few students come to the university just to study parapsychology because they had an interest in such shows, but that meant that they had to get serious about it and actually want to study an entire psychology degree and wait for that third-year program they've been longing for in parapsychology so that they can actually look at the real science behind it.
I think that's the key, Calvin. I think you hit that right on the nose. They have to work for it. A lot of groups don't really want to work for it. They see these haunted locations and they want to know, how did you get into that haunted location? In other words, I don't know about you, Steve, but I know through years of work and stuff, I mean, you have to build up rapport with a lot of places. You have to build a name for yourself. It's not just thrown out there and...
A lot of locations now, if you offer them money, and of course a lot of locations are in it for the money.
That's true too. You're right.
No, I've got no objection.
Too.
I've got no objection if the building needs a new roof and a few $100s or a few £100 isn't going to, it's a good contribution.
A donation.
And you can't blame them for doing it. But when it gets to the cost of, as we're paying in the UK, over £1,000 for a night, and all that buys you is 6 hours and not even a bowl of cornflakes at the end of the night. I mean, £1,000 for 6 hours in a damp building, and then they restrict you to 20 people.
20 people, imagine that. Only 20 people on a ghost hunt. Oh, that's a shame, yeah.
Goodness.
That must be a real
That
good...
must be nearly double what we had the other night.
Well, we probably had a better investigation than your 20 people did.
We had a great
Yeah. And, we actually did a Harry Price investigation, which was kind of
At the
cool.
Old Manse,
Right.
Yeah.
And we used Harry...
Cool spot.
Yeah. You've been there, right?
I have.
In fact, you were there before I ever did.
Yes, I
That's
was.
right.
La-dee-da.
Wow.
It's Ian got one. But yeah, it's an awesome historic spot.
You told me you were in the Minutemen.
Well,
I was. At one
probably
time.
was,
Yeah,
yeah.
probably, yeah. Yeah, I've been in a lot of things, but anyway. So let's move on. I want to switch to a little bit to make this a little interesting,
oh
okay?
boy. Okay.
I'm sorry, so far we haven't been interested.
No, it's been-
Oh, no.
Should we do our own show? We'll move the cameras. Right?
It's your bloody accent's putting me to sleep, you know what I'm saying?
came all the way from the UK to be treated like this?
You just said,
Wow.
you just said a word that in British television would have had your show taken off the air.
Oh, that's a shame. We're in America, land of the free.
They're just beeping him out, actually. He thinks he's getting away with this, but it's just beeps behind the camera.
So I am getting Anne involved in this.
Oh, boy.
And this
He
is
is
Okay.
brave beyond belief.
okay.
Yes, I
do
am.
we have a studio
Don't you
clock?
forget it.
Anybody can do a countdown for us?
I do it every week
Time-wise,
along with you.
for, like a minute. If I have a minute,
Time a minute.
you guys do it. Yeah. Give me
I'll just
after a
give
minute.
myself an endless minute.
So here's the deal. What I want to do. This is kind of new. I need someone to close it out for me. Good. Okay. So Anne is going to ask a question, and Steve is going to have 1 minute to answer that question,
Okay.
and then Cal will have 1 minute to answer that question.
Same one.
It'll be the same question,
Okay.
and then we'll reverse it because we don't want to give Cal the last word every time. So
Okay.
I don't think Steve would.
Always
So,
traditional.
so you can ask anything about the paranormal or ghosts, and think about this, and they will answer. They have 1 minute to get it, so that's it.
Okay.
Do you want me to start for you?
Yes, please, because I'm kind
Do you
of.
need a minute to think of the
I
question?
think I need
All
a
right,
minute to think of the question.
I'll just give you an idea, and you really should. Okay, so let's start out with the obvious question, and we'll give it to Mr. Parsons.
Do you believe
Are we all set?
Do you
Okay,
believe in ghosts?
Parsons, pay attention. We are set. Ready? Your question is, what is a ghost?
The simple answer is, in under a minute, we don't know. But a ghost is a broad spectrum word like the word car, automobile. If you see a grey, shapeless apparition out the corner of your eye, you'll say you see a ghost. If you see a figure wearing a British uniform at the Manson Concorde and it suddenly winks out, you've seen a ghost. If you hear a rapping, you'll have experienced a ghost. All of the mechanisms might be entirely different. So the longer answer is, we just don't know.
Did he get that under a minute? He did? Son of a gun.
I think I could probably beat
All right, so Cal, are you ready? Are we ready there? Ready? Go, Cal.
A ghost, they can also typically be termed as hallucinations. A visual hallucination could be anything from seeing a full figure of a person to just mists or some shapes within a building, sometimes known to be haunted, not necessarily haunted, but usually seen by a person, usually. Doesn't always have to be a person, could be an animal ghost as well. You don't think there are animal ghosts? There are animal ghosts reported. Psychologists will call it a sensory experience, psychiatrists might call it delusional, but that is a ghost. It's usually a visual hallucination.
You skeptic.
Yes.
This is working really good. This is the first time I've ever seen him shut up in less than a minute.
Wow.
So, do you have a question, Ann?
Okay,
last
I think
presenter.
I
Here we go.
Thought of a question.
And Cal, you get the first.
I get the
answer.
first one.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so Cal gets the first question. Would you consider orbs part of a paranormal investigation, a valid part of an investigation?
No, most definitely not. No. No.
And why?
No.
I have to throw in why.
And why? Is that too separate question? 2 minutes now.
1 minute. Your time's running.
Why? There was always reason to doubt when they first came out, and it was obviously something to do with the cameras that was capturing them. And then Steve came into it.
Nope.
I'm done. Yes,
We're not bounding it. We want your answer.
I am his answer.
Yes, he's my scapegoat.
Because my research was the answer.
His research was the answer, so that's my answer. My answer is Steve is the answer.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
That was under a minute.
1 minute.
Do I have the time he's got left over?
No, you don't.
No.
1 minute.
Orbs first appeared on digital cameras in the late 1990s as a brand new phenomenon, and it was the frequency of the phenomena that was the problem, because if it was paranormal it should be, by definition, quite rare. There were many explanations offered. One of the most reasonable seemed to be that airborne dust, particles, water or rabbits would reflect the light from the flash straight back down the lens and cause these circular light anomalies. In the late 2000s, Fuji in Japan released the world's first 3D stereo digital camera, which had two identical cameras in the same body using one flash, so that when you press the picture button you had two simultaneous pictures. We used that camera and we took to date over 5,000 stereo pair images. That's 10,000 individual photographs. If the orb is dust, it would appear differently on both sides of the stereo pair. The left and right would never have an identical orb.
Done. What's his name?
That's Adam.
I'm surprised
Adam,
it
thank
took
you.
you a minute.
And I finished
Did-
it on a minute.
I did. You did very close to that. So do we have another one for him?
Oh, wow, you didn't say I had to have more than one.
Was it? No, that's all right. If you don't, then I'll give one more.
All right.
We'll do two more questions, and then we'll move on to something else.
Oh,
But
okay.
I really like this, and I think this is interesting because most of the time you can't get them to shut up. So I mean, it works out really good.
I want to talk more about orbs. Can we come back to that, though?
Yeah, we can definitely.
Finish that one first.
No. You had your 1 minute on the Orby thing.
Okay.
We'll come back to orbs though.
All right.
Definitely, we'll
Come
most
back to
definitely
orbs.
come
All
back
right.
to orbs.
I published a paper called Orbs Are a Load of Balls.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's not the thing that we're looking for.
It was a scientific
Okay.
It was accepted.
So, a person, and this goes to Steve first. Okay, a person sees an apparition in a house and calls you.
Who are you going to call?
What do you do?
The very first thing I do, and I had this question at the ASAP conference only recently, is I generally ask him to call me back in 2 weeks, and I apologise for being really busy, and say, yes, I think we might be able to help you, but can you call me in 2 weeks' time? Because that way we get rid of the attention seekers and the people who just want talk to. If they call back in 2 weeks, then we'll take it more seriously. But you only asked about what do I do when the phone first rings.
Right. So how would you proceed after that? You're still going.
Well, no, you only gave me that. I've answered the first question in under a minute.
He's right.
All right, I'll give you that one. Oh, we actually have another question. Well,
another
we
question?
have Cal's answer. Though. We'll hold off on that one for a second while we get Cal's in.
My answer to that is almost similar. Most of the time I don't get a call, I usually get an email, but the email actually explains
very long.
everything they're already experiencing.
Yeah.
So on similar grounds, I say,
You phone them up and say.
I'm busy at the moment, I can't answer this. No, I say, keep a diary and get back to me. Keep a diary, get back to me in a couple of weeks or so if it starts to continue and so forth. And again, that has filtered out a lot of the genuine accounts from.
Okay, so we all kind of agree that we do get these people that are looking for something other than real help. Okay, so we have a question,
another
and this is Emily.
Yes, Emily has another question
Adam,
for us.
thank you for your help, by the way.
This question is from Steve, and how do Steve and Cal differentiate between ghost contact and spirit contact?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Well, that first of all looks at the definition.
You have more than a minute, by the way.
Definition of a spirit and a ghost, which are actually two entirely separate phenomena. A ghost is, as I said before, a broad range of experiences, mostly apparitional, but does include other sensory experiences too. A spirit is and that they are muddled up interchangeably, but a spirit is considered to be the departed or some part of us, the soul that survives death, and that is specific to the spiritualist movement. Harry Price in the 1930s, one of the first of the modern era ghost hunters, would try to often make the case, and it's a case I make too. Ghost hunting has got nothing whatsoever to do with survival of death research. So I think, well, first of all, before we can even answer that question, we have to make those definitions. So having made the definitions,
For me, I've always found that spiritual contact is more something, again, as you mentioned with spiritualism, something of the seance room. And so the raps and taps within that, and what the spiritualist movement got involved in, the holding of hands and sitting around in the dark. Whereas ghost contact is this confrontation. That's actually seeing something, experiencing something within a building. You're alone, it could be spontaneous. And more so, you could say that a ghost experience is something that is spontaneous, and the spiritual one is a sought experience. So that's how I would define.
So wouldn't you?
demonic contact burns.
I mean, they have sound for that. Anyways, so wouldn't you really say that when you investigate, when you study, you're really studying or investigating the paranormal, and therefore, once you start your investigation, then you can discern whether it's spiritual activity or ghost activity?
First of all, I'd like to correct the mistake you just made there.
I don't think I make mistakes. I usually never do.
You said that we go to investigate the paranormal. That's not the case. We can't investigate the paranormal. We can only investigate the normal.
We investigate reports of the paranormal. My apologies.
But
There are no experts.
in terms of measuring and investigating, we can only measure and investigate the normal. It's the bit that we're left over with, the bit that we can't measure is the bit that we should be interested in. But before that, we have to eliminate all of the bits that we can measure, not just automatically assume that the scratchy noises on the EVP recorder, however convincing they might appear once you've told everybody what it says. Listen, Martha, it says, get out of here. Oh, yeah. It does. And then if you play that, you know, so you can investigate. It's like throwing balls at a coconut shy. You knock a few coconuts down, but one or two coconuts will still be stood there. And they're the coconuts you really need to work at. Mm-hmm. Throw more balls at them, and we need to know why are they still on the stands.
Right. Or as my good friend Richard Felix say, once you've checked off all the normal boxes, what's left is what you study.
I prefer the balls one.
Yeah, well, you would.
It's more in keeping with my concept of orbs.
You would. And we're going to get to that very shortly as soon as we hear Cal's answer on that.
On
What?
Balls.
On the differentiation between ghosts and
I gave you an answer just before.
You did?
He followed on. He was correcting you on something you said.
Yes. That's
I've
right.
already answered.
You sure
That's
did?
why I was confused just then.
You sure did?
He did. He did. Oh, we have another question.
Oh, no.
We have another question.
Okay.
This is a question from DHaunt68. Whoops. What has been the most fascinating historical place you have investigated, Steve?
Without any shadow of a doubt, it has to be Borley.
And what happened to the old ants? What? You lied to me.
They're one and the same.
You lied to me.
What was I saying the other night? It was Borley Rectory, the old man's conquered.
Your man says you're 9 out of 10.
Borley Rectory was a building in the about 60 miles north of London in a tiny village hamlet, which it was first built in the 1860s, and from before the time it was built, and indeed from immediately after the building existed, it was reported to be haunted by the figure of a nun, by a headless, or a stagecoach driven by headless coachmen, and all manner of other phantoms and apparitions. In 1927, the rector contacted the British Daily Mail, Daily Mirror newspaper, asking for the help and to be put in touch with the Society for Psychical Research. Sensing a story, the paper sent a newspaper reporter along, and they also contacted Harry Price. Harry Price was, at the time, Britain's leading ghost hunter, and as we demonstrated at the Manse in Concord, all of the techniques that modern ghost hunters use relate to Price and the investigation at Borley. The rectory burnt down in 1939 and was finally demolished in 1944, but much of the site remains. And I was fortunate enough to do 2 overnight investigations in the building that now currently occupies the site. And although nothing happened, it was just being there, being in the footsteps of my hero, my childhood hero, and
Thank you.
and being able to sort of, I don't know, I have no psychic ability, but it was to be able to share some of the experience of Price, to walk the sort of the lanes, the nun's walk, to lean against the walnut tree in the grounds, and indeed to come back with a brick from the.
So you pilfered a brick from the Borley Rectory. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Sure he did. That's what they all say.
So without shadow of doubt, it's Borley Rectory for me.
That's awesome.
So they didn't ask Cal, but Cal, I mean,
It's not that important, that's why.
Cal, I mean,
What's the most
interesting
Laboratory you've been in.
What's the interesting historical experiment you've ever?
No, if you're going to...
Gansfeld.
Oh, it was brilliant. I remember that day. Fantastic. Anyway, it was Clifton Hall. I was there on and off for 2 years, and what the people that had been living there reported was, at the time that we took over, was headless apparitions, blood splatters on the children's sheets.
all the cool
The
stuff.
walls were shaking. also bilocations as well, modern day apparitions of the living, especially the people that were living there. Their children were seen in one area of the hall, vanished, and then they go back.
Doppelganger.
Yeah, they go back to the other area of the hall where the family were, and lo and behold, the child be there. Yet they were talking to it in the other area of the hall from two different angles. The mother and the grandmother would see the child on the stairs, and she'd disappear. But I first went there in 2004 or 5, and the place was like your classic haunted mansion. It got tiled floors that were all cracked up, a reception that was left alone, covered in cobwebs and dust, and all the lights were flickering, carpets torn up, but all the paintings and statues still left there. It was just like someone had completely abandoned it. But when we went back, they completely refurbished the whole place. But the activity was still interesting. You were hearing strange noises and whistling that couldn't be tracked down. Objects were drawn around that seemed to move still. And I went in several times and got to be part of a group that witnessed these strange things going on. And it had some great history. King Charles I had stayed there in 1632, I think it was. King Charles, anyway. Probably got the King Charles wrong.
Whatever.
2 Charles I.
Oh, I'm okay then.
That's about like 25 to 5.
I'm okay then.
Whatever.
But that's what you need to do. I mean, to go into a place for a few hours on a single night.
America wasn't a...
To go into a place for a few hours on a single night, what are you going to get from that? I mean, you need to go...
Yeah, what we need is we need to
over a
pull up
space
outside
of
in
time.
3 big black vans with the logos on the side.
That's right.
Load all the kit out.
Yes.
Spend 2 or 3 hours there, load all the kit back up, go to the hotel the next morning with our donuts and coffee and go, hey dude,
Got a knob.
then we
Got a knob.
Team jackets and t-shirts as well, you're forgetting
that,
that,
Steve.
Steve.
Reveal, and then we can sell merchandise.
Well, there.
I was actually a doppelganger
Full
once.
story.
Really?
Both of you.
True story.
Did it pay well?
Yeah, it did. It actually. When we went to Gettysburg with my good friend Richard Fairlix. You remember him, Steve, don't you?
I've worked with him many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
He did mention you.
Yeah. We rented a house, a little round top, and
Court case.
I went in one door, and Maureen came in after me, and she saw me in the other room there, and then I went up the stairs, and then I came out of the other door, and she says, "What are you doing here? You just went that way." It wasn't me. It was. She swore it was me. She absolutely swears today that it was me. It was a doppelganger. So there you go. Oh, we actually have another question.
Another question. This question is for Cal. What inspired him to write Telephone Calls from the Dead, and has his experience changed his perception of life after death?
Well, how that happens in my past life, I called Cal and said, "Cal, why don't you write a book called Telephone Calls from the Dead?"
Okay.
I was like, you're going to be Ron Kolek one day. This is fascinating stuff. I will do some research.
Oh, how did you? That's a good question, actually.
At university, while studying parapsychology, I was reading a lot of books by the late psychical researcher Raymond Bayliss and parapsychologist D. Scott Rogo. And I found that they'd actually collaborated on one book called Phone Calls from the Dead. But I was collecting so many books at the time, I didn't actually get around to reading it straight away. It just went on the pile of all the other books that I got. And then eventually I picked it up and thought, this is quite interesting. It just so happened at the same time there was a report in the news of a train crash that took place in California in 2008, and the guy at the head of the train was mentioned, a guy called Charles Peck, who was allegedly phoning...
See the same guy that was in the Ghost Hunters?
No, that was Walter Peck.
Oh, Walter Peck. Oh, his brother. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
It is true, this man has a...
And anyway, people believed, or his family believed, that he was constantly calling them on the cell phone. He would ring his daughter, his son, his wife. Whenever they picked up, they just heard static. They recovered his body. He died on first impact, yet he'd been calling or texting some 4 hours after the crash, and his phone was never recovered. Now, there's loads of rational explanations that could be put there. The fascinating thing was, though, it was advertised as a phone call from the dead, and therefore the family also believed it was a phone call from the dead as well. So this went out to a wide audience, suggesting that such things are, potentially possible. So I went about seeing if these cases are actually more common than we think. Did it actually expand beyond the book by Rogo and Bayliss? So I trawled through all the parapsychology journals and books that I could to actually find any reference to these cases. And there was very few. I really struggled. There's only 2 other books, both by Raymond Bayliss and Scott Rogo, that followed up with another chapter, but added nothing new. So I decided to look into new accounts with mobile phones, text messages and emails, of which there were quite a few going about. And when I had emails from people or phone calls saying that they'd had such cases, I either went to meet them or we had long email correspondence about them, or at least had one phone call with them to speak to them. And some of the cases that I looked at were unpublished ones by D. Scott Rogo. They were followed up, they were from interviews, and they never got published because Scott Rogo passed away in 1990 and Bayliss in 2004. They never actually continued the research. So with my book, it's an analysis of another 50 accounts. They did 50 accounts, I did 50 accounts. I probably had about 80 sent to me in all, but there's about 30 that either were just too weak a case, didn't seem credible enough, couldn't follow it up with an interview. So you have this nice round number of 50 for the analysis. Has my opinion changed after writing the book? I certainly found, for me, there was 3 cases that I really could not shed any possible rational explanation as to how it could have gone on. Having discussed with the people involved all these possible avenues and spoken to the telephone companies involved in the particular case. So I'm open to the possibility people were having these experiences, I can't deny that. But at least, has my opinion changed? I don't know, I'm still like that. I was probably like that when I started. I'm a bit more like that now.
I know Steve's like that.
Right now.
So Steve,
Are you up there somewhere?
I have never written a book.
so Steve, how did you write your, oh wait, that's right, you never wrote your book.
No,
Getting there.
It's actually quite good not to have to sell anything. It's different. It might be different next year because Cal and I are writing
Money is so less Tuesday.
the definitive book on paracoustics, which looks at how to record, how to analyse, and the academic research of all related sound and paranormal phenomena. But I find it quite refreshing not to have to sell anything, because although I should add, I've never written a book, but I've contributed to well over 50.
You know, this is not exactly true, because
Enjoy
on
it
the,
while
on
it
the way
lasts.
over here, on the way over here, Steve told me he sold AstroTurf.
Astral turf.
AstroTurf. Yes, AstroTurf. Now, did you or did you not tell me you sold AstroTurf?
I created, marketed, and invented a product called AstroTurf when we were in Ireland at the Dublin Paracon. When we were in the green room, we discovered a roll of AstroTurf that was spare. So we chopped it up into small squares. Now, the full story relies on a little bit of Welsh folklore and a little Irish folklore. But essentially, we told people that if they stand on this patch of astral turf, it would ground them and they would have more spiritual experiences. It was a good seller. In fact, I have one sheet left if you find it. I don't have any with me, but we can mail it.
It's
We
okay.
can use overnight FedEx.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
Astral turf. You heard it here
Okay.
first. Welcome to World of the Psychic.
Disappointed
I've always
with
wanted to
mine.
do that on camera. World of the Psychic.
So, anyways, you actually had
Those pets.
an odd question for Steve, and I don't know if you know this, Ann, but Steve is actually an orbitologist.
An orbitologist.
Yes, he is.
Really?
I look at spherical objects.
I'm not going there.
So, go ahead.
So glad.
But so many people are passionate and insistent that about orbs. They're not dust. They're not moisture. But they're not, light refraction. I could see a face in this orb, and on and on and on.
Actually,
how can you convince those people?
you can't. The standard explanation now is that paranormal groups usually say, well, 99% of them are dust or moisture or other airborne stuff, and 1% of, usually the 1% they're referring to the one that they took.
Yeah.
Is paranormal, and we've had it analysed by looking at it and playing with it in Photoshop. And anyway, you can't be an expert in the paranormal, so you don't know for certain that they're not. Now, the experiment we did, there was no 1%. There was never an orb in the same place twice, which meant it had to conform fully to the orb zone theory. So it was 100% normal, 0% paranormal. There are other phenomena in Wales. We have the corpse candle,
Corpse candle.
And in
English.
and in America you have the will-o'-the-wisp, which are little glowing balls of light that people report. Now, clearly they were reported before the advent of any photography. So the research that I've done only pertains to digital photography. And I didn't seek to convince people that that you can't see faces in orbs, and that orbs are angelic entities, and that pink orbs are for girls and blue orbs are for boys, and all of this other stuff that people believe. But there are groups, you know, and websites, especially I think www.flatearth.org.uk is one that's very, very good for orb believers, where we send them to the Flat Earth Society, because there are people who believe still that the Earth...
I know you have a copy of the book, How to Photograph the Paranormal, and it deals quite a...
through orbs.
And it deals, I mean, this is a learned person. I believe it's a doctor that wrote it, right? I mean, how do you answer that? I mean, this is what they believe, that this is orbs. I mean, someone will show you a picture of an orb, and they'll not just say, oh, there's a ghost. They'll say, oh, that's my cousin Elmer, who died in 1932.
Well, as I at Dining with the Dead at the Wyndham restaurant, we actually, and at Spirit Quest I'll be doing a similar demonstration, where we have we were in Wicklow Jail in Ireland, and we took some pictures while the medium was talking to a little orphan girl called Annie.
Oh, after you.
Orphan Annie. And as he was talking to little, I'm not kidding you, it was Annie, and she was an orphan, and he didn't say it, but we were all going, little orphan Annie. I took a picture, and I showed him the picture on the camera, and he gave us a sheet of paper that said, yes, that's exactly where he perceived Annie, and that's exactly, and he signed that paper that was the orb represented the spirit energy as he perceived it of little orphan Annie. But it was the digital stereo camera that was used. And I'll show you little orphan Annie on the left side and no little orphan Annie on the right side. But if we talk about believers, when we published the results, we had over 200 stereo pairs on our webpage, because obviously we didn't put 10,000 on it. And we had responses like, well, of course, that proves the paranormal because they're only on one picture, through to great research, guys. Have a look at picture 16. There's a face in the orb on the left, of the. You're not going to convince everybody.
So it's almost like a religious belief.
Well, some people will have that extreme need to believe for a very good reason. There was a book that I showed you the other day, which obviously you had. I saw it and thought Steve must have that, and went, yeah. And it was about orbs again. Another learned person with a PhD had written it with someone else. And the main thing when I looked at the back was how much comfort people were gaining from them. So the main thing that they were using them for was bereavement recovery. You know, associating the orb that they taken in a photograph in their home or in the home of their deceased relative, they were finding that comforting, knowing that in some form they continued on. But you know, aside from the orbs, there are far more kind of comforting experiences that people have during bereavement, sensing the presence of the dead, a smell of their tobacco or perfume that they can relate to, or hearing bangs and taps that are very symbolic to them. So.
I'm asking an awful lot of questions.
Okay, we just got the 2-minute warning. We have a quick question, so you guys are going back to the 30-second rule.
What do Cal and Steve see in store for the future of investigating the paranormal?
30 seconds.
I see it getting better. We're learning all the time, and in the past few years, we've become, I think, a lot more accepting of a multidisciplinary approach. Multidisciplinary.
Yeah, multidisciplinary.
Yeah. Steve doesn't like so many psychologists being involved, and I can understand that. And so Steve is coming at it from a perspective that isn't psychology, with the background in engineering and also having the qualifications in nursing and so forth, measuring nursing things, etc. Anyway, I'm waffling. Yeah. I'm waffling.
So
but no, we've got people coming in to parapsychology from a background in anthropology, philosophy, theology.
I don't want to answer the question.
No. but physics and all sorts. So hopefully by bringing in all these different fields to actually approach the paranormal, it's helping advancements in paranormal research. Because we're not just looking at it from one angle and purely believing that everything is down to psychology, when clearly it's not going to be the case.
All right. And Steve, quickly.
Draw a breath then.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Actually, more of the same. This continuing, as long as as long as people have as long as people have been seeing ghosts, people have been interested in investigating them. So ghost hunting will never stop. But at some point, the media frenzy-driven interest in ghost hunting will quieten down. There will always be a core of people that will investigate. But I rather fear that the rest of them will move on to something else: big cats, flying saucers, alien.
Little Orphan Annies.
Little Orphan Annie.
Anyways, I think myself that the more people get involved and the more information we can collect. I mean, some of it will be looked at the wrong way, read the wrong way, but in contributing, we'll move forward. You don't like parapsychologists. I think parapsychologists.
They're cute. They're cuddly.
Yeah. You don't like mediums, but that's fine too. But anyway, you don't like orbs. I can understand that too. But adding all these features, I mean, it works out. So, anyways, Steve and I have a show called Ghost Chronicles International. Oddly enough, it's on Tuesday nights in UK, Tuesday afternoons in the US. And we bring in all different types of people, even some we don't agree with. Usually we don't agree ourselves, but that's another point. But that's what we really need, is a dialogue in the paranormal to move ahead. And we can't exclude, we can't make fun of other people other than Steve. And that's pretty much it.
I think we need to wrap this up.
We do? Okay. So we got through our first show, and I want to thank you, Anne. Congratulations. Yeah, we did well.
Fantastic green room, by the way.
Thank you.
Although Ron took the pretzels off me as we came.
This is all digitized. It's not really there.
This is all a hologram. Watch my hand pass straight through it.
See? Isn't that great?
That's awesome. And Yorick.
It's all right. You're not on camera. Don't worry about it.
From Ronald.
We already cut to the other cameras. Too late.
From Ronald.
All right.
So,
Well,
till next time.
yes. Thanks for listening and watching us, everybody. And
Oh, my hat.
Great.
Where did I get my hat? Come on, hurry up. 10 seconds.
Hurry up.
The closet. Royal National Lifeboat Institution.
Thank you very much. That came all the way from the UK, so there
All
you
right.
go.
All right.
So tune in next time. Good night. God bless everyone.
Thanks for listening and watching. Good night.
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.